Reach. To arrive at the place that you have been traveling to. For example, they didn't reach the border until after dark.
Reading. The activity of somebody who reads. For example, my hobbies include reading and painting.
Rear. At or near the back of something. For example, front and rear windows. Rear. At or near the back of something. For example, front and rear windows.
Reason.
Reason. A cause or an explanation for something that has happened or that somebody has done. For example, he said no but he didn't give a reason.
Reassure.
Reassure. To say or do something that makes somebody less frightened or worried. For example, reassure somebody about something.
Receiver. The part of a phone that you hold close to your mouth and ear. For example, to pick up / lift / put down / replace the receiver.
Recognition. The act of remembering who somebody is when you see them, or of identifying what something is. For example, he glanced briefly towards her but there was no sign of recognition.
Recognize.
Recognize. To know who somebody is or what something is when you see or hear them or it, because you have seen or heard them or it before. For example, recognize somebody / something.
Recommend. To tell somebody that something is good or useful, or that somebody would be suitable for a particular job, etc. For example, recommend somebody / something.
Recruit. A person who has recently joined the armed forces or the police. For example, the training of new recruits. Recruit. A person who has recently joined the armed forces or the police. For example, the training of new recruits.
Recruitment. The act or process of finding new people to join a company, an organization, the armed forces, etc. For example, the recruitment of new members.
Refer. To send somebody is something to somebody is something for help, advice, or decision. For example, refer somebody is something to somebody is something.
Reference.
Reference. A thing you say or write that mentions somebody something else, the act of mentioning somebody something. For example, reference to somebody something.
Reflect. To show the image of somebody something on the surface of something such as a mirror, water or glass. For example, be reflected in something.
Reflection. An image in a mirror, on a shiny surface, on water, etc. For example, he admired his reflection in the mirror.
Refuse.
Refuse. To say or show that you will not do something that somebody has asked you to do. For example, go on.
Regard. Attention to or thought and care for somebody something. For example, regard for somebody something.
Register.
Register. An official list or record of names, items, etc., a book that contains such a list. For example, the bride and groom signed the register.
Registration. The act of making an official record of something or somebody. For example, the registration of letters and parcels.
Related.
Related. Connected with something somebody in some way. For example, related to something somebody.
Relative.
Relative. Considered and judged by being compared with something else. For example, you must consider the relative merits of the two plans.
Release. The act of setting a person or an animal free, the state of being set free. For example, release of somebody something.
Reliability. The quality of being able to be trusted to do what somebody wants or needs. For example, the incident cast doubt on her motives and reliability. Remark. Something that you say or write which expresses an opinion, a thought, etc. about somebody/something. For example, to make a remark. Remark. Something that you say or write which expresses an opinion, a thought, etc. about somebody/something. For example, to make a remark.
Remind.
Remind. To help somebody remember something, especially something important that they must do. For example, remind somebody yourself.
Reminder. Something that makes you think about or remember somebody/something that you have forgotten or would like to forget. For example, reminder of something.
Removal. The act of taking somebody something away from a particular place. For example, clearance of the site required the removal of a number of trees.
Remove.
Remove. To take somebody something away from a place. For example, remove somebody something.
Render. To cause somebody/something to be in a particular state or condition. For example, to render something harmless/useless/ineffective. Reply. An act of replying to somebody in speech, writing or by some action. For example, I asked her what her name was but she made no reply. Reply. An act of replying to somebody in speech, writing or by some action. For example, I asked her what her name was but she made no reply.
Report.
Report. A written or spoken account of an event, especially one that is published or broadcast. For example, are these news reports true?
Representative.
Representative. Typical of a particular group of people, that is a typical example of something. For example, is a questionnaire answered by 500 people truly representative of the population as a whole?